Okay, so we're going to be covering Chapter 9, which talks about social work in families, and myself and Jordan and Cody are going to be presenting today over the first couple sections, and then Whitney and Daniela will be finishing everything up on Friday. So I just want to start, I know we're not all going to be in social work, we're not all going into that, that type of work, but at some point we're all going to be working with families, whether it's our own family or like counseling a family or different family situations and problems. So we can all get something from this. So I just hope that everyone gets something from this. And if you have your book, you can pull it out. If not, we don't necessarily have to have it, but we're starting on page 273. So, and first we're just going to cover the goals for this chapter. The first one summarizes the 3 prominent approaches to family therapy. The next one, basic group work concepts. Apply concepts above into families, into family groups, and relate them into family situations. Okay, so the first section we're going to be covering is just the diversity of family forms. A family is a special institution found in every culture. So no matter what your beliefs or where you come from, you have some type of family. And in our book, Coleman and Creasy define a family as a group of people related by marriage, ancestry, or adoption who live together in a common household. So that's the typical idea of a family. That's what we all think when we think of a family, people living together. The next one, there's a bunch of families, types of families that aren't necessarily what everyone considers a family. It's more of a living arrangement. So if you have a note card number 1 with the number 1 on the front, in a parenthesis it has a 1, 2, or 3. You have just gonna go in order, so whoever has 1. These are the different living arrangements that it talks about that aren't considered a family.
A husband and wife raising 2 foster children who have been in the household for several years.
2 women, lesbians, in a loving relationship, raising a child born to one of the partners while in a heterosexual marriage that ended in a divorce.
Grandparents raising grandchildren due to illness or addiction of the parents.
A family with one spouse living away from home, perhaps because of military service in a foreign country or because of incarceration.
A family with one child who has a severe and profound cognitive disability living in a residential treatment facility. A man and a woman who have been living together for years in a loving relationship, but who have never legally married.
Okay, thank you. And then next, families in different cultures take a variety of forms. So what family is to some people is very different to what we think. What families do, traditions that they have, is totally different. So for example, a husband and a wife may live in a separate building. Living apart for several years after the birth of a child is very common. A husband can have more than 1 wife, and vice versa. A wife can have more than 1 husband. So there's 2 different forms of a family that the book talks about, 2 key forms. The first is extended family. Extended family includes parents, children, grandchildren, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, things like that. So you have more people living in one household, which is common in a lot of cultures. It's easier, it's more cost effective. And then the idea of a nuclear family is it's just the parents and the children, and that's it. So it's just your simple family, less people in the house, less people to take care of. And one of the things, I'm going to quote something from the book, it's on page 274, and Zastrow said, although the nuclear family is still the predominant family in the United States and Canada and many other countries, it is a serious mistake for social workers and other helping professionals to use the nuclear family as the ideal model that individuals in our society should strive to form. So this is basically just saying that as a society, each individual has their own idea of what a normal family should look like, because we all come from different backgrounds and different family situations. So it's hard to just say, okay, this is how every family should be, this is how every family should look, because that's not the case. Sorry. Okay, other family forms that function in our society, the second note cards. You want to start with number 1?
A married couple without children who are the primary caregivers for the wife's mother who has Alzheimer's disease and who resides with the couple.
2 gay men in a committed relationship, each of whom have joint custody of 2 children with his former wife.
A childless married couple who have decided not to conceive children.
A single parent with 3 young children.
A blended family in which the husband and wife have children in the current marriage, plus children from earlier marriages, all of whom live in the household.
Okay, so those are things that we see a lot. Families coming together from either divorce or single parents joining families, and we think that that's normal. But to some people that's abnormal. It's a totally different idea. So the next section talks about societal functions of a family. The first is replacement of the population. The second is caring for the young. Third, socialization of new members. Fourth, the regulation of sexual behavior. And last is the source of affection. So those are just ways that people are functioning with their families. The next section talks about family problems and the nature of social work. So being a social worker, you're going to see a lot of these problems occurring. And in your book, there's a whole chart, but just a few of the examples. You're going to see divorce, drug or alcohol abuse, bankruptcy, poverty, child abuse, and child neglect, all different sorts of abuse, and just difficult situations that, as a social worker, it's going to be hard to handle some of them emotionally, but it's everyday reality. You're going to see it happen. Like I said in the book, it goes into more detail. And when all of these problems occur, then people are going to seek help. Families are going to seek help in most cases. And the book splits them into 2 categories of the services of help that people can get. The first one is an in-home service. And in-home services, they're not necessarily in your home, but it's, in other words, it's saying like they're wanting to keep the family together. So they'll get help, they'll get family therapy, family therapy, daycare, and educational skills that will just help them kind of form their family back together, get reconnected, and fix whatever problems they were having. And the second one is the out-of-home services. Out-of-home services must be operationalized when the family can no longer stay together. So this is when either divorce or lack of child care can be provided. And one of the key points that we see is that a breakup for any family is very tragic. So dealing with these situations can be really emotional for the family. And I think a lot of times when we think of a family breaking up, it's divorce. But that's not always the case, because a lot of the times Child Protective Services will have to step in and kind of take over and take the children away from a home, which is breaking apart a family. And a lot of times that requires a lot of therapy for the child and the parents. So that's just an example of an out-home service. Other examples are foster care, adoption, group homes, institutional care, and a lot of times it involves the judicial system. Social workers engage in a variety of roles for in-home and out-of-home services. They're an educator, an advocate, a supporter, and a mediator. And next, Jordan is going to be talking about family assessments.
Okay, hi guys. So the first things we're going to talk about is the eco map and the genogram. And so first, we'll get the eco map. Okay. So Anne Hartman is the primary developer of this tool. Charles Zastro in her book defines it as a paper and pencil assessment tool used to assess specific troubles and plan interventions with clients. And so this map is usually drawn jointly between a social worker and the client. And so its purpose is to help both parties achieve holistic and ecological view of the client's family's life and the nature of the family's relationships with groups, associations, organizations, etc., and all that. And so examples of when this is used are marriage and family counseling, adoption, and foster care home studies. And so this map helps clients and workers gain insight into the client's problems by kind of providing like a snapshot view of important interactions at a particular point in time. And so here's like a picture of what a typical eco map would look like. And so first, a circle is drawn in the center, and that represents the client's family. Then other circles are drawn around the family circle, and these represent other systems like other families, individuals, organizations. And then lines are drawn to describe the relationships. So if you have, the thicker the lines means obviously you're more closer, or the dotted lines, you may not be so close. That's what kind of like the lines represent. The values of this map are, it allows the worker to better understand the environmental factors impacting the family. And so this then helps the worker form hypothesis of problematic dynamics in the family environmental system. And so this allows them to ask more questions to find those problem areas. And then once the problem dynamics are identified, it allows family members to kind of understand those areas and see where they can fix them. The next graph we're going to go over is a genogram. And Bowen is a primary developer of this technique. And so Charles Zastro defines this as a graphic way of investigating the origins of the client's or client's family's presenting problem by diagramming the family over at least 3 generations. So this is, again, usually made by the client and worker, and it's kind of like a family tree. And so this helps the worker and the family members examine problematic emotional and behavioral patterns in an intergenerational context, because what happens in one generation often occurs in the next. So here's a picture of what a typical genogram would look like. And so the symbols provide a visual picture of a family tree for at least 3 generations. And so example would be like who members are, their names, ages, and gender, marital status, and sibling positions. And so it's kind of confusing, but like in our book it would say like circles represent men, triangles represent women, and like there's a key, obviously there's different colors. So yes, the values of the genogram would be, a clear genogram graphically points out intergenerational family dynamics. It allows them to better understand the patterns impacting a client's family, which then helps them to generate hypotheses of problematic patterns for prior generations. And so once these problems are found and identified, they can focus on helping the family members resolve these patterns. And so values for the client family would be, helps them identify and understand the problems and patterns and resources. And then once they're found, they can start thinking of ways to resolve them. And so I know it's kind of confusing how these maps are, so is there any questions about them? I know it's a weird kind of thing to do family therapy, but. No? Okay, the second part I have is over family therapy. And so this is also known as family counseling. And so Zasha defines it as a subset of the broader classification of group therapy that is aimed at helping families with whatever interactional, behavioral, and emotional problems arise in the course of everyday life. And so problems can include marital conflicts, parent-child interactional problems, conflicts with grandparents or other relatives, domestic violence, communication problems, etc. And so family therapy perspective involves seeing any problem within the family as a family group problem, not as a problem on a part of any one individual member. So that's the part that kind of stuck out to me the most, because I like how they make it like a family group problem, because we all know if five people point the finger at us, blaming us, we're not going to want to change. We're going to get defensive, we're going to freak out. And so I like how they kind of make it a family problem, not just an individual problem. And now Cody's going to come talk about family therapy and verbal nonverbal communication.
Okay, so during our last team presentation, we talked about verbals and nonverbals quite a bit, and I'm actually going to talk about these in regards to the family therapy and how family talks together. Now, before we start this, I want to play a little bit of a game. We'll have a few prizes on Friday. Who's a good actor in here? Somewhat. I know. It's going to be like charades. Whoever comes up here will get a prize. Anybody? Okay.
Lauren.
Okay, so start off, we're going to go with nonverbals. Think of a movie, and you have to get everybody guess what movie this is without talking.
Yeah.
If anybody else can think of a movie wants to come do this, you can.
Lauren, you can act it out if you want to.
Okay, I can try to do that. I'm trying to get you to guess the title of it, because I don't know how. This is hard. I know.
You want me to do it?
Yeah.
Twist your arm.
Stomp. Dance.
Yeah.
Tap dance.
How many words? Oh, happy feet.
Yep.
Okay, now, next one, we're going to do verbal. Anybody can do the same thing, but you're going to describe a movie with that. You can't use any words in the title.
Go ahead, Madison.
Timon and Pumbaa.
Lion King.
Okay, so yeah. So that's kind of how verbal and nonverbal communication work. You're kind of projecting what you're trying to get at, which brings me into the avenues of communication. All right, there we go. And for the avenues of communication, we have consonance, condemnation, submission, intellectualization, and indifference. Now, consonance is your desired state. That's where what you're saying, the receiver accurately interprets what you're saying, and it's good two-way feedback or two-way dialogue, and everybody knows what the other person's trying to say. Now, condemnation, this is like putting a person down to make yourself feel better, and that happens a lot in society today. It'd be like, it'd sort of be like the mother telling her child, well, you don't do anything, like, you're lazy, you don't do any of your schoolwork or any of this and stuff like that, when really she's actually regretting never, like, applying herself in school, not going to college, not doing more with her life. So that regret she projects out onto her child. That would be what condemnation is. What it actually says is, condemnation involves family members severely criticizing, blaming, negatively judging, or nagging others in a consistent manner. More than occurring only once or twice, such interaction instead forms a regular pattern. So it may start off just a little bit, and then it eventually becomes a pattern, and that's how that family will begin to communicate. They'll just keep putting each other down. And this moves on to submission. Submission is, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of this, like, let's say that there's this couple, and this guy is, I guess he's abusive, and then the woman thinks that she's nothing, and she just goes along with it. And basically, the verbal abuse from him, she starts believing it, and rather than leaving, she just stays with him because she feels weak and smaller than that. This says, submission occurs when a person feels so downtrodden, guilt-ridden, or incapable that he or she succumbs completely to another's will. The person doesn't feel valuable or worthwhile enough to be assertive about his or her own rights and needs. And this actually goes into, this also goes into condemnation, because another form of condemnation would be, that'd be the verbal abuse, was that condemnation. You talk down to somebody, and that person you're talking down to, they end up becoming submissive, and then that's how a family will actually begin to communicate the same way. Like, it's kind of like when, like I said, that mother who talks down to her child, that child ends up thinking they're not going to be able to do anything with their life, so they end up not applying themselves, and it's a downward spiral pretty much between those two. Now, intellectualization, this is basically talking for knowledge, info, but no real emotion. And something I found, I didn't research this recently, but over the years, we've done studies through my psychology classes, and differences in men and women, it showed that men talk more for knowledge and information, and women will talk more for socialization. There's a study of this, and a lot of other studies. There's one famous one, but I'm not sure the name of it was, but there's been many of them that have been proving this. And gosh, I cannot talk today. The intellectualization would be more like, it's kind of like how when a mother goes, hey, how was your day at school? Good. What'd you do today? Nothing. You learn anything new? Nope. They're not really talking or expressing any kind of emotions there. The book defines it as intellectualization refers to the process of putting all communication on a strictly logical and rational realm. The existence of any emotion is denied or suppressed, and a person who intellectualizes likes to evaluate a problem rationally and establish a solution as soon as possible. I feel like I have a really bad problem at doing this, actually, because, I don't know, sometimes I just get news where I don't want to talk. I just want to get from point A to point B and get it over with. I don't want to have like a 30-minute conversation about what I'm going to eat later that night. And I think people need to like not talk like this. Don't only try to get information and knowledge, but express your emotions and have a good talk about, just talking about your day. And indifference is more like, it's kind of like ignore that mother that talks down her child, rather than even tell her that, she just ignores her. That parent may, or that child may end up just thinking that their mother doesn't care about them at all. So, like before, they might not apply themselves to life, they may not really try much to do anything, or it could even get worse than that. The book says, indifference involves remaining apparently unconcerned, not caring one way or the other, and appearing aloof. 2 common ways indifference is manifested in families is through science and ignoring behaviors. 1 or more family members may not talk or respond to 1 or more other family members. So you basically just completely ignore that person. When I go back to the condemnation, if one person is constantly nagging, constantly putting that person down, this person may completely just stop to not even respond to that person anymore and just start ignoring them. And when that happens, this person may not think that they care at all. Well, then that just makes them feel worse. So really, all these actually could happen from another one. Like the condemnation will end up causing submission, and the intellectualization could just turn out to be the indifference. On the indifference, one example it had was, let's see what this says. Okay, a newlywed woman on their honeymoon is insecure and constantly asks her husband, "Do you love me? Do you love me?" And after asking that so much, eventually he tunes her out because he's tired of hearing it. It happens over and over and over again. Well, rather than trying to secure herself, what she doesn't realize is she's pushing her husband further and further away. That's one of the problems with indifference in families. And next, we'll go over nonverbal communication in, whoa. Yeah, there we go. All right, with nonverbal communication, we talked a little bit about this in our last presentation. Mostly what this has to do with is facial expressions, voice inflections, and body position. So has anybody ever been talking to somebody and not completely comprehend what, like, couldn't tell if they're mad or happy or think if they're talking hateful just by the tone of their voice? Has anybody ever had that happen? Like, I get sometimes when I'm frustrated or something, people tell me, it's like, your tone of voice is terrible, you just sound like you're mad at the world or something like that when I get frustrated. But I'm really not trying to offend anybody. I'm just frustrated at the time. And this actually goes down into the congruent and incongruent messages. What you speak verbally and then what you do non-verbally contradict each other, and it either gives the wrong message or a confusing message. Like the one here in the book says, a woman says, "I'm sorry Frank passed away," with a big grin on her face. Well, she's sorry that Frank passed away, but the grin on her face shows that she's happy about this. And however, in this particular case, she's relieved to get rid of the old buzzard and be happy to be the beneficiary of a large life insurance policy. So your nonverbals and your verbals, they got to be congruent to get the accurate message, to have that consonance form of dialogue and communication. And that, I think that's all I got. Yeah, here we go. Incongruent messages and contradictory messages. Those are pretty familiar. Because like I was saying, when I get frustrated and I start to get that kind of harsh tone of voice. If I'm trying to be nice to somebody, but I sound all frustrated and mad at the world at the time, they may just think I'm being a jerk at the time. Or if you say something but you're joking, a person may not know you're joking, and they just think you're trying to be mean. And Nick will pass it on.
That's
What? We're doing it Friday.
okay. That's all that we're gonna cover today. But we are gonna have just like a short homework assignment. It's not hard. It's on page 310, and it's exercise C. So we just want y'all to look over that before the next class, because we're going to discuss that exercise. And I'll post it on Facebook as well, so you know the page. And before you leave, tell the person that you didn't turn to the first time, tell the other person an appreciation.
that you have.
Yes, exercise C on page 310.
I appreciate it.
Sorry, I was letting you write that.
Sorry.
I think I might just be reading books. Like, reading sometimes.
I don't know. You can throw away the note cards. I
It's
don't
just
need it back.
sometimes,
Here you go.
like, because I've had 5 eye surgeries because my eyes are.
Okay.